Greetings, Mark Orang here, publisher of The Sun, and today my guests are the intelligentsia of Town Hall here. Steve Porter, Selectman, Ben Colbath, Chair of the Planning Board, and Ryan O'Connor is our Town Planner. Welcome all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. So we're going to do 2 half-hour sections. I'm going to talk to you guys about the Highway District, and then Damon Steer, our reporter, is going to sit in on the next one, so we'll take a break and he'll sit in and fill in for the seat. So, just the basic stuff. The Highway District, so you've got a number of warrant articles addressing issues about the Highway District. Where is the Highway District in general terms? It goes from where to where and where to where?
There's a couple different sections of it. The main one being what we call the strip. From about Settlers, the new Continuum project is in Highway Commercial as well as Burger King, and then down to the train tracks heading into North Conway.
Okay. So heading up to up to here to North Conway.
Yep.
Right. And then
Edge North Conway, and then
Edge of North Conway, but it's also Village District, and so there's overlaying districts that overlap each other. So really, that commercial line ends at Artist Falls Road.
Right. Yep.
All right. So it gets a little confusing with the districts for sure. But the highway, does it go out to 302 and Redstone?
Yes, it does for a portion of it.
Okay. So, and what about and where does the municipal water and sewer overlay to that? That starts in Conway Village and goes all the way up to North Conway Village, right, on Route 16.
Right.
And then 302 to Walmart, to the intersection with Ridge Line.
Yep, that's right.
And is that it?
That's as far as it goes.
That's it.
Okay,
Well,
so.
West Main Street too.
For the Conway section.
Conway.
Yes.
Conway
section,
West Main
Okay,
Street
so it
and
goes, yes, West Main Street down by the Ham Arena?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. And not on Washington and Pleasant, though?
No,
They go-
Yes,
Yeah,
it
I
does.
believe so.
Washington,
It's
All
Pleasant.
right, okay.
Yeah.
So where I'm getting,
The core of Conway Village has Conway Village municipal water. If you're going down Washington Street, it
Oh.
stops at the bridge on the Swift River.
Okay.
Right. So that community to the lights, and then same on Pleasant, it goes all the way down to pretty much right before the fork there, right?
Right.
Yes.
So where I'm going with this is to ask about, just in the general planning, because about the next stages of the extension of the sewer, right? And if that happens, of course, once that happens, then it allows for a lot more density for commercial and residential. And there's no sewer between Conway Village and the 113 traffic light by the police station, right?
Right.
None.
None.
So Saco Woods condos are not on sewer.
No.
No, that's a community system.
Okay. And then there's nothing out at East Conway
No.
towards the dump. So what is the next planned section, and what would you like to see, or what you don't like to see? And I guess where I'm going with that is that a lot of these warrant articles address really restrictive control about the commercial district.
Right.
But obviously, once you open up more highway district to sewer, it opens the door. So I don't know how you address that.
That's a big question.
Thank
and
you.
So, and so this year we started a water and sewer master plan to understand that, because before we can answer the question of where it should go, what it should look like, where are these areas that should have a higher commercial or residential density, we have to understand the system that we have right now and its capacities. As you know, Conway just took over the Conway Village system, and so we're understanding the maintenance that needs to be accomplished there, how we need to strengthen that system, so then it maybe could be extended in the future. But with that master plan, we can then understand where it makes sense to put new infrastructure, how that works from a funding standpoint. Is that something that new development could pay for? Is it something that the town's interested in funding? How that all works is something the master plan will understand. We have capacity to treat it right now, but it's still a long road to understand where that higher density should go in the future. So I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're at the beginning stages of understanding our infrastructure first.
And Ben and Steve, from that perspective, because we know that in Bartlett, there's a vote to not instruct the selectmen of the town not to extend the sewer in Lower Bartlett up through 6th Intervale.
Right.
And that was defeated, so they are going to. What do you think about what do you think about long-term planning in the extension of water and sewer, the sewer?
I mean, you want to go first?
Well, to me, everybody is concerned about our water supply, our aquifer, so to speak. one of the best ways to protect it is water and sewer, and that's my opinion, because I think if you stop putting sewer systems in the ground and have town sewer to take care of the waste, you protect those aquifers for generations to come. So I'm a proponent of infrastructure like that to protect the aquifer. And people get confused because they think of water sewer as promoting commercial growth, and I think if you have a master plan in place and you regulate it with a vision of using it for more residential growth as opposed to commercial growth, or you use a mix of combined growth of commercial and residential and be disciplined in it. We've already seen what undisciplined growth has already taken place in the Mount Washington Valley.
Do you agree with that philosophy that, hey, let's protect the aquifer, but then, since we have it, we have to control the commercial growth?
Right, and I think that, in my opinion, from what I hear from people, is not really so much that the extension of water and sewer will make more commercial growth, but it's holding back density for residential growth. I think it's been stated several times over again, different properties throughout town that could have such great density provided there was water and sewer at it. The Morrill property is like the prime example. Like, it's used pretty consistently as an example of this would be the benefit of getting water and sewer out to Center Conway, because if the dream developer comes by and wants to put in X amount of homes with water and sewer, they can put in X amount more homes.
And the water, and just so frame of reference, the Morrill property is out by the light, by 113, by the police station. And it's actually in my backyard, so I'm hoping it never extends there, because there'll be another 300 boats in Conway Lake. But anyway, that's another story.
How very NIMBY of you.
I think I'm going to run for selectman on that issue.
But that being said, it is a very long way off to us actually getting any extension done. I think, as Ryan stated, that master plan is really the important part of that, is because, is it going to be the water precinct? Is it going to be the town of Conway? Is it going to be, hopefully, some dream developer like we all hope will come in and want to make that push to get it out there? I certainly, talking about the aquifer, we've started, I think, last year trying to be proactive about protecting that, because 10, 20, 30 years down the road from now, we don't want to find something in our water and say, why weren't we doing more to protect it? And so it happens all across the country. You hear those stories all the time.
So any guesses of if there's going to be an extension, when would that happen? Are we talking 5 years, 10 years, 15 years?
You're probably talking closer to 15.
Yeah, these are really long-term projects.
By today's standards, because there's monies that need to be raised. There's a process of getting engineers hired to do a study. I mean, we're not financially or even physically set to start this right now, other than get the master plan in place.
Yeah. So when we do spend, go ahead, Steve. Yeah.
It's a huge process to go through. North Conway has done it in the past, and it's taken years for them to get to where they are right now. So
And a lot of that has to do with grant money, too.
grant monies, yes. I mean,
The other thing I wanted, before we get into these really fascinating warrant articles that nobody can understand, is the state is passing some, or the Senate just passed some potential laws that would basically force some zoning onto local communities. And one of which is that it would disallow towns that aren't on sewer to have no more lots no bigger than 2 acres. And if you're on sewer, that no bigger than a ½ acre. And it's interesting at the legislature level, because you got the Republicans who voted for it because they just want more development, and then you have the Democrats who voted for it because they want more housing. And there was only one New Hampshire state senator who voted against it, which is surprising, a Democrat, because she thought it usurped local control. So I guess quick answer on what do you think about the local control versus state? Go ahead, Steve, Ben, and Brian.
in my opinion, I think the state should stay out of the local areas. We know what our areas can handle. We know how we need to develop our areas respectfully. They don't know what's going on up here in the North Country. I mean, the only time they come up here maybe is to go skiing or the vacation in the summertime. They don't know what the day-to-day ramifications are. So that one person that voted against it is probably the only smart one out of the whole bunch. Not that I'm taking shots at our representatives, but we know what we're doing. We do it daily. We work with it. We talk to the local people. We know what's going on here. We know what needs to be done to benefit the area, as opposed to going down to Concord.
Ben?
That's tricky because I think that Conway does have some of the most permissive zoning in the state of New Hampshire. We've learned that, through exercises with the zoning atlas and through just through the master plan process and trying to figure out what we can do to incentivize density or more residential growth. But I do agree with Steve. I think it's, kind of contradictory to everything we've, been taught, that this is why you run for office, is to make change locally, and that the benefit of the system we have in place is that everybody gets a voice and you get to help to direct the growth of your community, and that we vote locally, and that we also vote state of New Hampshire and federally. So why they would take away that ability for communities and for citizens to make those changes they see fit for their community is kind of confounding to me, but I guess I missed that part of the conversation.
All right. Ryan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, our zoning ordinance now pretty much aligns with what the state's trying to do as far as a density standpoint, lot size standpoint. But each community is so unique in New Hampshire, especially from the seacoast heading north. And that local control is extremely important for us to understand how those regulations are going to affect our community. There's a lot of resources out there for planning boards right now and municipalities to take advantage of to support housing, but it's very difficult to understand how those changes would affect the community in the long term. What are those consequences going to be? And I would prefer the state to pursue funding to assist planning boards and towns in understanding how the tools that are available could be used to translate into zoning that would support housing, rather than saying this is going to be the set standards for a lot size or density or whatever that looks like, because it's just different in every community, and we need to interpret that as the community sees fit, so then we can support projects like water and sewer if that's what we choose to pursue and is best for our environment and for density.
All right. So let's, if we can go through these warrant articles, excuse me for I'm not going to read them, but generally what happens, I think, is that they're not, because a lot of it's legal language, I guess, and so, and planning language, so they're not easy to understand, frankly. And I think most people just see, oh, it's planning board 7-0, so check. They check it off. But first, what about the hotel moratorium? That's not in the warrant this year, correct?
Because we superseded what we were allowed to do legally. We were allowed to use the moratorium for 2 consecutive years pertaining to that, and I think we just,
It's done. So would you, Steve, would you support another one, a third one?
if legally we could have done it, I would have done it for another 1 or 2 more years, and the whole premise for me promoting this is because I wanted to get our zoning rewrite done. But unfortunately, when the state says you can't do this anymore, you can't pick on the hotels, you've used your ward, we can't do it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
Ben?
I'm supportive of it.
Well, and it wasn't just a hotel moratorium, it was a hotel and commercial development greater than 50,000
50,000,
square feet. So it wasn't targeting one specific thing. It was the big development, the big growth that takes a lot of people by surprise when they see it come to this small town, especially if they've been a lifer here or 20, 30 years here. It would be nice if we were able to do it for another year or two, if the state would allow it. We did spend a lot of time knowing that it was expiring this year, trying to come up with a plan on specifically where we'd want to see that size development in town. And we started, pretty strict. We started really small, and if you've been paying attention and watching the meetings, you've probably seen us adjust and shift and and that was over the course of 4 or 5 months.
At least,
I mean,
yeah.
That took us a long time to get to a point where I don't even think most of us are super comfortable with how guided that space is that they be built in. I think that the vision at the beginning was to be more restrictive, but then as we moved through the conversation, we realized, okay, we didn't think of this, we didn't think of that, let's make sure we include this, let's make sure we bring these people into the conversation. And so as that happened, we got really right up to warrant time, and we had to make a decision and move forward. And that's why, based off of that conversation, how long that took and how great the shift was in that conversation over 6 months, we just need more time to really be able to make the smart decisions and have those conversations that will be what's right for the town.
Right, so having said that, these, a number of these warrant articles are more restrictive on in the highway commercial district than it was, right?
Yes.
So, Ryan, if that's the case, and the moratorium is expiring basically on April, the second Tuesday in April, then how does that work? I mean, are there hotel developers champing at the bit at your door, wanting to submit an application, or?
No, there aren't. I haven't seen any in the past couple of months. Probably almost a year now. I haven't seen anyone come forward in a conceptual capacity looking to construct a hotel. They could be waiting. I don't know, but I haven't seen anything.
Because the people in the hotel business said that bubble is over. That we're not.
Could be.
Yeah, the market's saturated. It's obviously, we have I know your favorite hotel there, on the one on the Strip. All right, so if you could, I mean, we got like 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
Gosh, this thing like Article 5, adaptive reuse.
Yeah.
I mean, can you
Sure.
just explain in layman's terms what this means?
Absolutely. Yeah. So with the moratorium being over, it's not just about restricting commercial development, but it's scaling it to fit the lot sizes of what the community is hoping to see for the highway commercial district, and being a little more condensed on sites so there's more green space, it's better for the environment, but also to encourage the reuse of existing structures rather than just building new all the time. And I understand economically from a building standpoint that's difficult to do, but hopefully this incentivizes that as much as possible. And so that's what things like adaptive reuse and infill development are trying to accomplish.
So a tiny example of what that means to a developer.
So for infill development, that's a smaller lot size is permitted on a much larger property. So in the highway commercial, where you have water and sewer, you have the interior roads on a development, you can subdivide a smaller lot, build a smaller structure. We see that with like the Panera development in Settlers Green that was proposed. Those types of things break up those massive sprawls of parking lots. Hopefully, at least that's what it offers. Any other?
So is this a better use of the existing land and buildings, or is it more restricting?
I think that if I could,
Yeah.
An example also is the Cambria site. The Cambria site has the grill, 110 grill 110, whichever it is.
Yeah.
But also on that site, there is a plot it was proposed as a bank originally.
Right.
And I think if you're looking at that now and you see parking lot, or if you look at that with a bank in it, it doesn't look as much parking lot. And now you're not tearing up a whole bunch of new green space in a different lot in town to put that bank in. So it kind of prevents more of that, removal of properties that have been green for 10, 20 years, whatever, and less, paving and asphalt in areas where we already are concerned about the amount of coverage that there is. And the infrastructure is already there in place for safe egress and exit. There's already been a DOT driveway permit put in place. There's already been studies for it. When they proposed that development, that was proposed for the hotel, the restaurant, and the bank. So I think there's a lot of benefits to
So
it.
Steve, I don't know if this is an appropriate example, but we all know that not Hannaford, but the Lowe's parking lot is
Yes.
way too big. Home Depot is way too big. Could those developers, because Barsamian with Home Depot or whoever owns the Lowe's complex now, could they come to you and say, oh, we want to put a restaurant at the end of that parking lot? Is that what you mean by use of that space?
Realistically, they could turn around and do that and not impact the site. If anything, with the standards we're proposing, would actually take away some of those massive asphalt barriers that we have and put more green space in place and add another business to the site, which is like the Lowe's site is more than adequate for another business if you put in there.
So how does that affect parking? I know the planning board has been, I think the old days of, we got 100,000 square feet, we need 1,000 parking spaces, and
Well-
those are gone. So the planning board has been much more flexible, correct, with allowing fewer parking spaces.
Well, and again, we learned a valuable lesson when the Lowe's site came before the planning board back many years ago. They followed the town's parking standards, which in paper didn't look that bad, but when you look at the site today, It's massive, and that's why a lot of times when other developers came before us, they came in with an alternate parking study because we knew that what we had adopted, which we're hoping to fix when we do our zoning rewrite, is that's way too much parking for those standards in that site, especially when you drive by there any point in day and it's only 20% full.
Ryan, so are the standards actually changed in the zoning in any of this for parking? Or is it just the planning board has more flexibility?
So we haven't changed our standards, but what our site plan regulations do allow is what's called alternative standards. So if a traffic engineer can show that this parking count makes sense for that business and it's represented in all these different areas, then the planning board has the ability to accept that parking count rather than the 2 spaces per 200 square feet or whatever it is for the use.
Okay.
So.
All right. One of the other ones that struck me was the idea of on the western side of the strip limiting to 30 feet height restrictions for a building, and that and you mentioned in the Warren article that if it blocks the view of the moats or the Mount Washington or Chicora. So I think one of the issues that people have who aren't think the planning board's a little arbitrary is that it seems like you're introducing standards like, okay, who's going to say that we can't see the moat mountain from where? And also, if you drive up the strip, you can, if you go in front of some of the old motels, the older motels, I mean the traditional motels, Gable and all that, you can't see the moats from there either. I mean, even though it's not a 30-foot building, you still can't see over the little 20-foot peak because they're so close to the road. So I guess explain the rationale between the 30 feet. What is it now?
35.
Okay, so an extra 5 feet is make or break?
Pushing it? Well, do you want to answer that?
You can step back.
So to understand how a structure affects the view shed, which I believe is in the definition, they're going to submit elevations of that structure. So what it looks like when that building is in place and what the view is today and how it would change. So standing from a public right-of-way, so let's say Route 16 on there, if a building goes in, how is that view going to change? And the developer's goal will be to align with not modifying that and staying within the height restrictions. So I think as development has come in, the big question has been how is this changing the landscape? It doesn't look like what it used to as I drive down 16, and hopefully this helps address that. And maybe there's better places for those taller structures, which could be the opposite side of 16.
So what happens like with Cambria, and I don't know how tall that building is, but it's pretty, it's sunk down, so it doesn't block the view, I think, right?
Right.
Yes.
So what if that was 40 feet? I mean, what would be wrong with putting a building that's 40 feet high if it's sunk down like that?
Every time I went to the grocery store, someone would be like, "Why'd you let them build such a tall building?" I mean, it's definitely just
Aesthetic?
Well, it's aesthetic. It's when I voice those opinions, it's based off of what I'm hearing, what people are saying to me. And traditionally, people who've lived here for a very long time, or even a short time, they're not used to seeing 40, 50-foot buildings go in. I wasn't on the board when Home 2 Suites got built, but I heard that they got an earful on that too, because it is a monolith of a building right as you enter down, Bowling Alley Hill there.
How tall is that building?
45, almost 50 feet,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, because I was the one sitting on that.
Yeah.
But what about density? So that would apply to residential units too, then, right? I mean, because if you're trying to encourage, and I think part of this, and I don't know which one it is, it'll take me 5 minutes to find it, but part of it is to encourage mixed use, right?
Absolutely.
So if you have mixed use, and I think Ridgeline next to the bank, which is going to be Dunkin' Donuts and then whatever else, they want to do a mixed use where it's retail or commercial on the bottom
Right.
and residential on the top, which makes sense. That's old school, actually, the way old villages were created.
Yeah.
But if you're limiting to 30 feet,
Yep.
I mean, that's limiting to 30 feet. I mean, you couldn't put Saco Woods down on the strip then.
No, but you can still have 2 floors.
Right. So and this is just on one side of the highway too, right?
Yeah,
So
but the cemetery is on the other side of the highway.
Well, they got the best view in town. And we're trying to put in several other mechanisms that make it beneficial for them to put those residential units in place, whether it's reduced green space requirements or different incentives
Right.
that a developer would look at as, okay, maybe I can only go 30 feet, but I don't have to do all this other work, or I can do this because of that. There's a lot of levers that can be pulled to help affect that change that we're looking for them to actually build that residential mixed use, because I don't believe that we actually will see many people do that.
Yeah, and to Ben's point though, there's a larger lot coverage that's permitted when you do have residential units. So if you're building just a hotel, you might be limited to a smaller area if you're doing mixed use or had some type of long-term units on there. And if you're putting affordable units in, that allows a height increase at the building as well. So there are some incentives to try and push residential units on these commercial lots.
All right, Steve, you don't think it's arbitrary that it's 30 feet?
Nope, not at all. I think with what I'm seeing right now, that we've seen what 45 and 50 has done, and 35 is a better compromise, but not quite enough to protect the view. I mean, why do people come up here? It's because of the views. And we're only doing it on one side of the road, so I think we're being open-minded that on one side you can have the bigger buildings. We're protecting the west side, which is the trademark of the area. And to speaking on the point of the mixed-use housing, all you hear about is people are complaining because there's no housing. This is a great way to try and promote these developers to come up here to put housing in for the workforce. I mean, you hear it every day that you walk the streets. How can you allow more projects to be built when we don't have any workforce? Well, we got to have housing. So the developers, we ought to try and push them to promote housing on their future sites. And so that's why we put the tools in place to try and allow this to happen.
Right.
And as far as the claim that the 30 foot may be an arbitrary number, any number could be an arbitrary number. We could say 50 feet, and how'd you come to that? But I've never had anybody come to me and say, why didn't you let them build that building taller? I've had a lot of people come to me and say, why is that building so tall?
Sure, but so does the planning board have flexibility that if there was I'm just making this up, obviously, but if there was a Cambria type location, someone wanted 40 feet, does the planning board have authority to?
That's where the zoning board comes in.
The ZBA.
Exactly. Yeah. So when a regulation doesn't make sense for a property, that's why that relief is available. And I understand what you're getting at. How is 30 feet suitable for every property? And being on the other side of the moratorium, our goal this year was to protect us. And we're going into a full zoning rewrite, and we'll be able to look at regulations that maybe fit the individual lots better, but that's more complex language. And this year, we're trying to protect us as best we can, so we have time to maybe put in those fuller regulations that offer more flexibility. So it can be site to site specific.
All right, so we only have a couple of minutes. So what we're going to do is take a break, and then reporter Damon Steer is going to sit with you and talk about some of the other articles. But I can't resist talking about Article 57, Mark Council's article. And the overlay to that is that he's really suggesting that the planning board and the selectmen don't work well together.
Well, I'll start with saying, and I've mentioned this before, that over the course of all my years on the planning board, I've never heard that we don't work well together as much as I had in the last month since this came up, because the fact of the matter is we do work together pretty well. And even though it might not be, something we grandstand on or plaster in the headlines or boast about, it doesn't mean that we're not, making these conversations happen at town hall. We're not stopping into Johnny Eastman's office or up to Ryan's office and having these conversations together, and then those initiatives move forward with each board respectively. I do think that we've done a lot over the years together. Steve and I work great together. And
Steve, you're the selectman's rep to the planning board. And
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are I don't think people are really paying attention to what's happening on a day-to-day basis, because if we weren't working well together, we wouldn't be talking about the master plan like we do. That, to me, was a joint effort between the planning board and the board of selectmen, and it had overwhelming support. Just like the monies that we received through grants through the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board to do other things, meaning the zoning rewrite or the Water Protection Act. If we didn't have a good joint working relationship between the two boards, this stuff wouldn't be happening right now.
And
We
Article
wouldn't be
57
talking
really
about it.
addressed town-owned land, right? Just town-owned land. And one of the examples that Mark uses was the parking lot that was paved down by the Conway L School. And then he says it was attributed to more flooding when we had the storm a couple of years ago. And I guess the counter argument to that is that's what town hall is for, is to figure out how to pave a parking lot. that you don't have to, shouldn't have to go to a vote.
I have to agree with you on that. I mean, we have certain powers. Our RSAs dictate to the Board of Selectmen what we are allowed to do. You know, I understand the concern, but I think it's a little misguided for the simple fact that when you look at how it's presented now, when it was first presented, it was an overall referendum, and now, as time's gone by, the individual has quickly said, well, this one's not involved, that one's not involved. You're picking sites which aren't involved, so you're dictating that it's okay for the Board of Selectmen to present a dog park, or the Board of Selectmen to okay a skate park.
He had carve-outs. Basically, he was saying...
But it's not okay to do the rec path.
It does seem to be centered on the motivation seems to be the right
To
path.
me, it's an individual's ideology on what they think should or shouldn't be done here in the valley, and I think the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board have worked well over the past 20 years. I don't know. I don't
And
think
the
you can-
selectmen voted 4-1 against this, right?
And I think Ryan voted. He didn't vote against it because he wasn't sure what it meant.
All right. And,
You'd have to
and the
ask
planning
him his
board does
opinion.
not recommend this article?
We didn't vote on it. It's
You
a
didn't
selectman's
vote.
article.
Okay, so
we
the
don't,
budget
we don't
committee,
vote
I
on
guess
it.
the budget committee.
But I will say, going back to your initial question and just kind of giving credit where credit's due, the master plan process was a huge process. It's a very important process, and it was widely championed by the entire community as a successful process. People loved it. We got a lot of feedback about how inclusive we were, and that costs over $100,000 of money that Steve was able to help procure through the select board, and it didn't come out of the taxpayer's pocket. That was grant money. That was funds that was available for us to use for projects for the town that the select board could have said, well, I know the planning board wants to do something, but we rather do this. No, Steve went to the bat for us. He, at the select board meetings, he really thought we should be using this money. We kept reporting back and forth about it, and it made that happen. I mean, that's not nothing. That was a lot to do, and that took a lot of effort from Steve and a lot of effort from us and other people involved in town hall. And I think that if I'm looking at that money sitting there available for the community good like this, or they need to use it for an environmental study to put 2 parking spaces in at the town garage, I think it's a no-brainer where the community rather see that money spent.
All right. All right, I think we wrapped it. Ryan, you want to say anything about that article?
I think these two summed it up well.
That's right. You're the non-political person on this panel. All right, we're going to take a break. Damon is going to be here. Thank you all. Just
Thank
sit
you, Mark.
tight.
Thank
okay?
you.
Mark?
Thank you so much.